Is it irresponsible not to vaccinate your children? Get your calls in now, 0207 862 2222. Now, none of the major childhood vaccination targets have been reached this year in England. Uptake from MMR, which combats, of course, measles, mumps and rubella, has hit a 15-year low of just 83.7% of children. Now, that's despite warnings about a rise in measles cases. Now, that's left almost 1 in 5 children not protected from serious illnesses as they prepare to start their primary school journey in September. Marvyn, you're a father. Mm-hmm. Is it reckless?
It actually is. And I'm not saying that parents are willingly being reckless, but as a consequence of the misinformation, making that choice to not do it is endangering more people than it could ever protect. And I think the herd immunity being down so low, we should be aiming for 95%. 83% is a massive drop from where we were even 5 years ago. My platform, Don't Like Dads, did a campaign around MMR and trying to build trust in vaccinations again. But we as a generation have never seen the consequence of not having these vaccinations. And so there is a little bit of ignorance to what actually it looks like and what it can be when people are suffering all around us, and the scale of death. Things like smallpox are horrible things to observe. And I think we do need to get into a place of education. That's the NHS's and the government's responsibility to build that trust. But us as parents also need to be mindful that we're not scaremongering ourselves out of the well-being of our actual children who we're trying to protect the most.
Lowri?
Well, my 2 sons who are now in their 20s, I did not give them MMR. I've got autism in my family. It's going back a long way now, of course, and I just wasn't willing to take the risk. They had single jabs, so they were protected, which was quite complicated to get and quite expensive, but that's what I did. With my daughter, she had all the childhood ones, but I didn't give her HPV. Because I looked at what was out there, and I thought this idea that there's a medical consensus, for example, HPV, there is not a medical consensus. There are some doctors who don't advise it. So I think this idea that it's all settled. I think as a parent, when you give birth to a baby, that baby is perfect in your eyes. And so it takes a lot. I mean, I freak out at the first haircut for a baby, let alone the first time somebody puts a needle and injects something artificial into that child. It has to be the parent's choice.
But there is a medical consensus when it comes to MMR and its links with autism. There just aren't any links.
Well, I would still say that's not settled. And I think, but the most important thing,
But you realise that you are in a...
I'm in a minority, but...
Not just in a minority, it's just factually incorrect.
Again, hang on, let's talk. We can talk about facts. We can talk about the fact that we were all told to take the COVID vaccine, which I did. All the boosters and everything, all my kids had them. And we were not told that teenage boys, for example, were at increased risk of heart problems. We were not told that. I think that there is a problem of trust, because these drugs, and they are drugs, are produced by big pharma who have a lot of money to make.
Right. So
and the question, for example, with HPV is, some doctors say actually should be about screening and not about
I think that's a part of the misinformation, where I think it's like MMR is very, very long-standing. Smallpox vaccination is very long-standing. And I think the story that was generated around autism, the slight difference with you, and I actually put this to your credit, is it looks like you've done some sort of research. You've gone to figure out, come up with a view, and you've come up with a solution around the problem that works for you. I think a lot of people are just taking it on face value and spreading misinformation and conspiracy theory, which is creating this massive problem that we could all have to deal with.
But I just have to question this misinformation, disinformation. It's very, it's a phrase used to dismiss people.
Okay.
And the thing is that we know that drug companies misrepresent the results of their studies, and they actually put out false information. Right. So understandably, parents now are a bit more careful.
Let's bring in Dr. Natalie Rout, who's going to be joining us for this section. Natalie, thanks so much for giving us your time. Good to see you. Let's just get one thing out of the way. The links between MMR and autism. Has that not just been put to bed scientifically, that there aren't any links?
Yes, it absolutely has. There are no proven links between the MMR vaccine and autism. There was one study that was published in 1998, and that was withdrawn because it was proven to be incorrect. And actually, there is no scientific evidence that suggests a link between the vaccine and autism. So I would urge people to really not take that with a pinch of salt. Yes, there was a lot of noise about it back in 1998, which has lingered on until now. And unfortunately, the power of social media is such that, you know, one video can go viral and it's very influential to people. People look at things on things like social media and say, oh, that's fact. And it is not fact.
Natalie, can you also help clear up HPV, for example? Again, Lowri was mentioning that perhaps there isn't a full medical consensus of that. What can you tell us?
HPV is proven to be linked to certainly cervical cancer in females, but there is also a link with other cancers, also in males now, things like anal cancer. And actually that virus, there are several strains of the virus, many strains, but that virus has been linked to severe cancers. And what we do know is that by giving the HPV vaccine that has been rolled out for many years now, that there's been a reduction in the number of cases. So we see clear correlations between vaccination and response rates. So yes, there's a lot of evidence that vaccination does work.
Okay, Natalie, stay with us. We're getting lots of calls. I want to get to people watching at home. Michelle's in Wiltshire. Michelle, welcome to the show. The question we're asking, is it irresponsible not to vaccinate your children? What's your view?
I think it's irresponsible not to vaccinate your children, because if we do vaccinate our children, we would possibly eradicate some more of these diseases that are around.
And were you at any point, can I ask Michelle, were you at any point doubtful that the vaccines would do their work, or have you always believed that that's the way we should go?
I've always thought that vaccinate your children. I have vaccinated my daughter with every vaccination that I've had, apart from one which did cause medical issues for an aunt. But trust your doctors. OK, Michelle, thank you. Let's take another. Chris is in Hampshire. Chris, welcome to the show. What do you reckon? Is it irresponsible for people not to vaccinate their children?
Hello, yes, I do believe it's irresponsible for parents not to vaccinate their children, because it's the children that will get ill, and potentially, I think we've forgotten how deadly some of these diseases can be, and it's children that could either be severely disabled or pay the ultimate price and die.
Yeah. Chris makes that point, Natalie, that perhaps, you know, people have forgotten about these diseases, well, because we were quite successful in vaccinating people, but now you're seeing a resurgence of measles, for example. Just describe what that looks like for people and how dangerous measles can be.
Measles is a severe viral illness. So you might think, oh, it's just a virus, but it's actually a severe viral illness. It's highly contagious, so it can spread very quickly, and it can cause a variety of complications ranging from infection of the lungs and pneumonia to inflammation of the brain, encephalitis, and that can lead to long-term brain damage. Obviously, chest can lead to long-term lung problems, and in extreme cases, and those cases are rare, but they still happen, it can lead to death. And only last month, a child in the UK lost their lives due to measles. So it is a really severe infection. And I think you might say, oh, well, that's only one death. But if you see some of these children who end up in hospital with the pneumonia, with the encephalitis, and touch wood, recover from it and are able to carry on at home, they've suffered really badly. It's very scary as a parent to watch your child suffer like that. So it's a very serious illness.
All of which is absolutely true, obviously, but what about the parents who say their children have been injured by vaccines? Another very rare occurrence, but it does happen. And if that's your child,
okay,
that's the other side.
That's the concern. Natalie, what's the response?
Yeah, and I hear you. I think, of course, there are complications with vaccines, rare or otherwise, but with something like the MMR vaccine, which was rolled out in the UK in 1988, that's sort of almost 40 years of it being in circulation, and we've seen the response in cases of measles significantly drop when that measles vaccination program started. And the rare complications are so rare, and certainly, touch wood, no deaths from the vaccine. Most commonly, you'll just get a fever or a rash, and that's it. Rather than anything severe like death or pneumonia or encephalitis. So it's always a risk-benefit analysis. What is the risk of a side effect from the vaccine versus what is the risk of my child catching this severe deadly infection.
Which is, I think, something that a parent should be allowed to make the choice on. We do not, thank God, yet live in an authoritarian state where all parents are forced to vaccinate their children. We have a choice, and we must be allowed to make that choice.
I think it creates a question of safeguarding. I think if you allow your child, if you make the decision on behalf of your children, which is your legal right to do, and then as a result, your child contracts this and becomes severely ill or passes, I think that scrutiny needs to go back to the parent as a matter of fact of your decision-making choices. As was rightly weighed up, there is an option between a side effect and a possibility of death. If you make that decision and it creates a death, I think you should be held responsible for that consequence. I think our children, people still believe that their children are fundamentally their property to do as they wish. You're the guardian of that child, but your job is to keep them alive and keep them safe. If you fail to do so, there 100% should be a consequence.
Hang on, if I allow my child to ride a horse, to ride a bike, to I'm also putting them in harm's way. But I've made that decision as a parent.
Okay. I think that's an irresponsible conflation. I think that is.
Okay, let me pause you there because I want to get back to the calls. Chris, thank you. Let's move on to Sally, who's in Devon. Sally, welcome to the show. What do you reckon? Is it irresponsible for parents not to vaccinate their children, even if they've gone out, done all the research and thought to themselves, I don't want to take that risk? What do you reckon, Sally?
Well, I think it's very irresponsible. They're not only safeguarding their children, they're also safeguarding children that can't have vaccines at that present time in their life. My goddaughter's little son had leukemia when he was little, and so he didn't have an immune system during treatment. So if one of his brothers and sisters hadn't been vaccinated and had come home and given him measles or chicken pox or mumps, it might have been totally fatal for him. And quite frankly, obviously you and your panel are too young to remember, but I've had mumps, I've had chicken pox, I've had measles, and it's horrible. So to think a little rash or a little fever for a day isn't as bad as having the disease. I mean, I was lucky I didn't get it so that I ended up in hospital, but it's not fun. So I think everyone should vaccinate their child, not only for the benefit of your child, but for the benefit of children who can't actually have the vaccine at that point in their life.
And Sally, that's a really good point. Natalie, I want to get you to come in on this sort of herd immunity, because there are members of our community that cannot get the vaccination for different reasons. What are the dangers to elderly people, other kids who can't have the vaccination? Does it affect them if those immunisation levels continue to drop?
Oh, it absolutely does. And that's why these low vaccination rates are such concern, because, I mean, obviously there are immunocompromised children, so children on chemotherapy, children who are on high-dose steroids for certain conditions. Being pregnant immunocompromises you, and being elderly and with various conditions makes you vulnerable as well. And if you do contract any illness, if that's, for example, just a simple common cold, it can be a lot worse for that cohort of patients. And you could be hospitalized with a cold if you are a vulnerable patient. So you can imagine that the risk of contracting something like measles, mumps, rubella, which are live vaccines, so cannot be given in certain scenarios, is very serious. Those children would end up in hospital, and it's terrifying.
Natalie, another question that crops up a lot is for parents who have immunised their children, but they're in a cohort where the immunisation levels are very low. Are the immunised children still safe?
If those children are fully immunized, and so if we just take, for example, the MMR vaccine, which we've been talking about, so there are 2 doses that are given. The first dose is given at 1 year, and the second dose for children born before this year, for example, are given it at the age of sort of preschool. However, now the vaccination schedule has changed so that they'll be given it at 1 year and then 18 months. But until you've had that second dose, you don't have that 99% protection. So, you know, it's not 100%. So of course you're always still at risk. And people's individual responses to vaccinations can vary. So we're not, some people might not mount enough of a response, but certainly if you do not have 2 vaccines, then you are at risk.
OK, let me try and squeeze in some more calls. Sally, thank you. Derek's in Exeter. Derek, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Good morning to the panel, to everyone. I'd just like to preface what I'm going to say about this by saying I think Marvyn mentioned smallpox, and my understanding is we don't vaccinate for smallpox. It's been largely eradicated. I think it meant chickenpox.
Yeah, OK, go ahead.
Thank you.
But basically, on this point, I think that parents are, the weight of scientific evidence suggests parents should allow their children to be vaccinated, but I would like to say also that actually it's down to the parent. You could argue, for example, that some parents allow their children to have unhealthy diets, which will lead to ill health and
Derek,
premature death in later life. So you've got to draw the line somewhere, and I think it's down to the parents, but we should try to persuade them to get.
I see what you mean, but what about the pushback from people saying, look, whether you want to allow your child to go horse riding, which carries a risk, or eat unhealthy food, which is going to affect them, this is actually one of the issues that affects a whole community, because it is through herd immunisation that we eradicated things like smallpox, which Marvyn mentioned. So without a community functioning as a whole, then what happens is those diseases continue to crop up and cause harm to people who can't be immunised. So isn't there a responsibility for parents to keep those herd immunity numbers up?
I think, yes, you make a good point, Alexis, but I still think you can't mandate it. We should just try and persuade parents to do the right thing.
OK, Derek, thank you. Dr. Natalie, thank you. Always good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us for this. And thank you all for your calls on that. That's all we've got time for. Vanessa is going to be picking this up a little bit later. She's going to be asking us, the NHS is going to roll out a chickenpox jab to all children. Is that the right thing to do? Perhaps it's, some countries have, you can't go to school unless you've got your vaccinations. Is that something that we might see in this country? Who knows? Later.